Stop taking out your frustrations on me. A married man argues non-stop with his wife multiple times a year. Are these arguments that serious? Or can everything be resolved with better communication? Find out in today's episode of Coach Ben's Case by Case.
How do I get my wife to stop starting arguments right before bed? My wife exhibits a pattern of starting fights, and we've talked about it pretty much every time she's done it. But I don't know what to say to her to really get her to improve her communication on these things. Last night was practically a great example of how these arguments go. Usually, but not always. This starts when she's decided to play some competitive video game before bed. She tends to take competitive games very seriously, to the point where I can no longer do things like tease her about them in the way I've always teased friends. She ends up pretty frustrated at these games pretty regularly, and she often takes out that frustration on me.
So they're both 29 years old. That's pretty interesting. How do I get my wife to stop starting arguments right before bed? Okay, so he's saying that she starts the arguments, not him. My wife exhibits a pattern of starting fights, and we've talked about it pretty much every time she's done it. But I don't know what to say to her to really get her to improve her communication on these things. Last night was practically a great example of how these arguments go. Okay, let's see how it goes. Usually, but not always. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. Not always, but usually. This starts when she's decided to play some competitive video games before bed. Okay, that's kind of interesting. I mean, playing video games, anybody can play video games no matter how old you are. I understand that. But it's pretty interesting. Usually, arguments after playing video games, let's see what's happening here. She tends to take competitive games very seriously. I think almost everybody does when they're really into it. That's normal, but you should be able to control yourself. So it looks like maybe she doesn't have any control afterwards. Let's see. To the point where I can no longer do things like tease her about them in the way I've always teased friends. She ends up pretty frustrated at these games pretty regularly. Okay, and she often takes out that frustration on me. This should not be happening. Okay, you guys are both 29 years old. I mean, you guys should be mature enough not to be getting frustrated with video games. That's something for the kids, teenagers, maybe even young adults in their early 20s. But you guys are going on to 30 and above. So this is, yes, it's pretty ridiculous. My question for the husband in this case is, you said not always, but regardless of how the arguments start, why is she feeling this way? Because being frustrated over video games, I've experienced that when I was younger. I stopped playing video games a long time ago. I mean, I will play them occasionally just for the fun of it, but trust me, it is no part of my life whatsoever. A small, minuscule, if I find myself with some extra time and I want to have a nostalgic experience by going back and playing some retro games, that sort of thing. So I can't imagine 29-year-old playing video games this heavily unless she's a streamer, but there's no mention of that. So why the frustration? You should be having fun. And you have to learn, this has everything to do with relationships. You have to learn how to lose in competition, whether that's online or offline in sports. It's not losing anyway. Somebody has to lose the game. So it's a maturity situation. It's a question of maturity. So she can't handle losing. Maybe she's losing too many times. Well, it's time to put that controller down. If it affects you that much, it's similar to watching soap operas. The same ordeal. You're going to feel all negative and upset. And many in the Hispanic culture, they end up taking out that negative energy that they see on the soap operas and Spanish soap operas out on their husbands and family. I've experienced that myself with my own family growing up. But definitely when you found your potential soulmate, this should not be happening. You should be having fun. Why don't you play games together, for crying out loud? So there's no mention of that. Let's see if he mentions joining her and playing some video games. You know, I mean, maybe she doesn't prefer, but if she doesn't prefer to share the moment, then what's the point? At least him watching her and rooting for her, cheering her on, or something positive out of all this. But we just started the case, so let's see if it gets better or worse.
It's gotten to the point where I really just try to pretend like I'm not around when she's playing so that I won't do something to distract or annoy her. Last night I was just quietly reading a book while she played and wasn't really paying attention to her game, so I'm not even sure how frustrated she might have been getting at it. She decides to pick a fight, typically over nothing important. For example, yesterday I had noticed that she had filled our bathroom hand soap with water to dilute what was left, since we had gotten to the point where the pump wouldn't work.
All right, it sounds like it's going for worse here. Let's have a look. It's gotten to the point where I really just try to pretend like I'm not around when she's playing. That's not good. She's taking this way too seriously. So that I won't do something to distract or annoy her. Last night, I was just quietly reading a book while she played and wasn't really paying attention to her game. So I'm not even sure how frustrated she might have been getting at it. Okay, so this is not good, okay? Like, okay, I understand, and with a couples, one partner needs their personal space and the other partner needs theirs. That's respected. That should be respected. Say, if you're not going to go to the gym, but she's going to go to the gym, you're going to go play soccer with some friends. Okay, whatever the activity is, it should be done responsibly, safely, and with having fun in mind. So this is becoming toxic. The activity of playing this video game is clearly, she needs to step off of it. She needs to turn it off, take a few days rest from that activity, find something else better to do. Unless she's a streamer, but if she's a streamer, the same thing applies. Tell your audience that you need to have a break. You're having burnout issues, and it's starting to affect your relationship. Stop, right? So stop and get some help from your partner, or go work on yourself. Go get some fresh air. Go do something a lot more that you actually enjoy, a lot more fun, right? That's the idea here, because clearly the main problem here is not the husband. He's trying to tiptoe around, not step on some eggshells with their concentration, which he's taking way too seriously this video game. I actually consider this a rare scenario, a situation here. Usually it's the guy who's addicted to video games in the first place, but times are changing. But this, a married couple, 29 years old each, arguing over frustrations over a video game is not supposed to be happening at all. I mean, no arguments are supposed to be happening, but let's go ahead and take a closer look. Last night, I was just quietly reading a book. Okay, so he's minding his own business. He's respecting his wife's personal time. I'm not even sure how frustrated she might have been getting at it. Okay, she decides to pick a fight, typically over nothing important. For example, yesterday I had noticed that she had filled our bathroom hand soap with water to dilute what was left. Okay. Okay, many couples, they do that, okay? That's not a bad thing. They want to conserve whatever's left. Some people are just it's not an obsessive compulsive disorder or anything. It's just a habit, a curiosity to see how much they can push it before they have to buy another one. They should just buy another one, okay? Let's see what's happening here. Since we had gotten to the point where the pump wouldn't work, okay? This is nothing to complain about. But if she's so agitated by the toxic activity of playing a video game and taking it so seriously. Again, there's nothing wrong with playing video games. When you're taking it that seriously, now the activity has been rendered toxic. And it's affecting your relationship, for crying out. Your marriage. So it's nothing extreme, obviously, but it could become extreme because this is the catalyst for causing fights over nothing. Like, for example, here with the hand soap. So let's see if this case gets any more ridiculous with the arguments, or if it gets, hopefully, a little bit more mature.
I find the watered-down hand soap a bit unpleasant, so I just got a new bottle of hand soap out, opened it, and set it next to the diluted one, so she could continue to use that one if she wanted while I use the new one. I didn't mention anything about this since it didn't seem like a big deal to me, but it is something that I haven't done before in the roughly 5 years or so we've been living together. She had definitely noticed that I had done this at least 2 hours before she went to bed, but if she was curious or annoyed, she didn't bring it up then. She waited until right before she was going to bed, and instead of asking, "Hey Matt, why did you open the new bottle of soap before the old one was finished?" she shouted at me from the bathroom, "Hey Matt, is there a reason you like wasting soap?"
So just so that everybody knows, I've heard of couples, married couples, who have been together for decades or 1 decade or less than a decade, close to it, they've gotten divorced over less than this, believe it or not. And, the reasons are amicable situations. They have solutions. They have even easy solutions, but they refuse to do it. They have attitude issues, emotional, mental issues, whatever you call it. They have issues to where they even get a full-blown divorce over it because they're so unhappy over this and that, when all they had to do was the most simplest solutions. Sometimes a solution is complex, but in this situation, this is not complex at all. I find the watered-down hand soap a bit unpleasant. Oh my goodness. So they're still talking about the hand soap. So I just got a new bottle of hand soap out, opened it. Okay, so he did the right thing and set it next to the diluted one so she could continue to use that one if she wanted while I use the new one. Okay, so the best of both worlds. Whoever's addicted to making hand soaps, to preserve them longer for a longer period of time, well, now you have the new one open too. Okay, so kudos to that. I didn't mention anything about this since it didn't seem like a big deal to me. It's not supposed to be a big deal. But it is something that I haven't done before in the roughly 5 years or so we've been living together. Okay, I don't know if it's exactly 5 years over or under, but 5 years is quite a bit of time. You're half a decade into the relationship. So things like this, it's pretty normal, but it shouldn't be taken to the extreme. So let's see how extreme this case gets. She had definitely noticed that I had done this at least 2 hours before she went to bed. But if she was curious or annoyed, she didn't bring it up then. She waited until right before she was going to bed, and instead of asking, "Hey, Matt, why did you open the new bottle of soap before the old one was finished?" Wow. She shouted at me from the bathroom. Oh, okay, wow. So not even having a face-to-face conversation. That's pretty disrespectful. She's really agitated by the video game nonsense. But remember, he said most cases. I do wonder about the other cases that have nothing to do with the video game frustration. Where does that frustration come from with those remaining arguments? Hey, Matt, is there a reason you like wasting soap? Okay, so she's aggravated. She's agitated. There's no reason to just get a divorce over this. This is obviously fixable, okay? We have to find out what's beyond the agitation. What is she really frustrated about? Because video games, that's supposed to wear off. And if it doesn't wear off, then she has a problem, a psychological problem that she does need to go see a therapist about, if it's that bad. Your obsession over losing in video games or not getting those special bonuses or the secret hidden whatever. If you're obsessed with the video game and it's causing you frustration, you might need therapy over that. That is not healthy. Now, I recommend the simple thing. Just take a break, and hopefully these arguments will go away because it's not supposed to be happening. And it doesn't have to be over toothpaste or soap or whatever it is. It's the most ridiculous thing. If you're walking around agitated by the smallest thing, and your husband has to be walking on eggshells, that's bad. The relationship is already becoming toxic. It's not the worst case scenario, but it could quickly become the worst case scenario. It doesn't matter what the catalyst is, what the cause is. So be very careful in this case. 5 years together is a good amount of time, but it's not a lot of time. So you guys are still in that immature phase of synchronization. The first 10 years, at best. Many couples, they require 15 years, even up to 20 years or beyond to finally grow up. Because this couple at borderline 30 years old, this is a ridiculous argument. It could happen to any couple, especially after 5 years living together. But she had differently noticed, okay, last 2 hours before. Yeah, so right before bed, she's saving the argument. So she's taking out her frustrations on her husband. So let's see if the husband, how he handles the situation. I would like to hear that. What are you telling your wife when she gets like this? Let's see if he actually mentions that in this case.
This seems to me to be a loaded question meant to put me on the defensive and assume that whatever motives I had must be wrong. I tried to explain my reasoning. She just kept shouting down my answers with reasons I was wrong to do it, not actually explaining what annoyed her about it. She did this shouting from both the bathroom and the bedroom, never coming out to the living room to look me in the eyes. which feels to me like a power play meant to shout me down rather than discuss the issue. Then she goes to sleep without the argument coming to any kind of conclusion or mutual understanding, and doesn't say so much as good night or I love you. For example, the last thing she said to me last night was, well, you can just buy the soap then. I did buy those bottles of soap.
All right, well, it looks like we're still floating around in the land of the immature. So let's go ahead and go over this part. This seems to me to be a loaded question, meant to put me on the defensive and assume that whatever motives I had must be wrong. I tried to explain my reasoning. She just kept shouting down my answers with reasons I was wrong to, just because she's miserable. Why is she so miserable, right? I think this goes beyond the video game, so let's continue. We only have what we have to work with. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have to look at the case, the evidence being provided. We don't know a lot of variables to the case. So we have to do the best with what we have to work with. Not actually explaining what annoyed her about it. She did this shouting from both the bathroom and the bedroom. This could have nothing to do with the video games. I think that's him guessing about it. You know, sure, she might have frustration over the video game, but there's obviously something much more deeper going on here. So let's see if we can find that out. Never coming out to the living room to look at me in the eye. So she's really disrespecting her husband here. So why so much disrespect? Why no honor into having a conversation face to face? Where's the honor in the relationship? Where's the mutual respect here? Because if I was him, I would go up to the bathroom and talk to her, but maybe he's already done that so many times and it doesn't matter whether he's being yelled at down the hallway into the room or whether he's talking face to face with her. That could be the case. Which feels to me like a power play meant to shout me down rather than discuss the issue. Yes. So go ahead and just let her have a hissy fit, because if you're trying to communicate with her and she's not listening to you, that's very disrespectful. It's actually very toxic, pretty much abusive behavior if this is chronic. Like you say, this is usually the case. Then she goes to sleep without the argument coming to any kind of conclusion. Yeah, because she doesn't care about your feelings. She doesn't care what you think. She's having it her way. Her way or the highway. Or mutual understanding, and doesn't say so much as good night or I love you. This is really bad. See, I think this is beyond the frustration from the video games. Somebody dropped the ball, or you both dropped the ball. Where's the intimacy? This video game shouldn't be that epic of a deal to be causing this form of resentment. She's literally resenting you. And now you have to dig deep. Maybe you already know the answer and you don't want to share it. But you have to dig deep if you don't know, if you have no clue. You have to play detective, as I always say. For example, the last thing she said to me last night was, well, you can buy the soap then. I did buy those bottles of soap. Okay. See, that's even hilarious, because if he's already buying the bottles of soap and she's saying, well, then you can buy it, she should already know that he's buying the bottles of soap. So she's not even appreciative, if that's the case. We're taking this all at face value. So if this is the case, you have a highly toxic spouse that you need to work on, because is she simply going through a moment? Because you only said a few times a year that this happens. That's still bad. It's not the worst case. It's not every single day. I would like to know how things are when it's a good day. Does she really love you? Does she really ignore you intimately like this? Not even saying good night or I love you? After a long day? This is, that's pretty bad, even if it's a few times a year and you're already expecting these situations. You guys only been with each other 5 years, but either you guys are not seeing each other enough, you guys are probably too busy, but that level of intimacy has to be secured. You guys have to say I love you every single day, and good night, give each other a kiss or a hug at the very least, something. And so if this even happens once a year, that's bad. And that's not being a perfectionist. I'm just saying there's for something to affect your intimate life, your intimacy with your spouse, your partner, it's gotta be severe. If you guys had an argument over something big, somebody dropped the ball and it's their fault, I get it. I get it. You know, the silent treatment, yada yada, arguments, work it out. But for this situation, video games as a suspect, to be this extreme with you, there's got to be something far worse. Let's see if it's revealed or it's not revealed.
She sulked in the bedroom a bit, reading a book or browsing the web on her phone a bit, before turning out the lights without saying anything else, refusing to say so much as good night after such a petty fight, especially after she did have some downtime to cool off. It feels a lot like withholding affection as punishment to me. Furthermore, we've discussed these communication problems every time they come up, and she knows that while she's able to sleep and focus the next day just fine after an argument, that I personally struggle to sleep after an argument with no real conclusion, and that my mind just keeps on thinking about it the next day.
All right, so now he's explaining just how bad it is on his side. Maybe she might be all passive and disrespectful, like nothing's going on. But let's see just how bad it is for him, how much it affects the husband here. She sulked in the bedroom a bit, reading a book or browsing the web on her phone a bit, before turning out the lights without saying anything else, refusing to say as much as good night after such a petty fight. It is very petty. But like I said, something deeper is going on here, especially after she did have some downtime to cool off. Yeah, that's abnormal. If she's had enough time to cool off, take a shower before you go to bed, prepare to go to bed, and then she's in the bed reading or looking on the phone, on the web, whatever website she's checking out. I mean, she should have been cooled off a long time ago after those video games. So obviously she's having some type of resentment that's pretty deep towards you. It feels a lot like withholding affection as punishment to me. Yes, why is she punishing you? That's a good word to use in this case. I call it abuse. It's abusive behavior. Neglect is abuse. Many people don't think that taking no action is action. No, that is an action by taking no action. And it's never justified in the right way. It's never justified. By you ignoring your spouse, your partner, you are abusing them because they want to know what's wrong and you're not telling them. Communication is key. Many people think that's cliche. No, that's one of the basic foundations of any working relationship besides trust is communication. You can't establish a trustful relationship without communication, effective communication. Furthermore, we've discussed these communication problems every time they come up. Okay, well, she's not living up to them, is she? And she knows that while she's able to sleep and focus the next day just fine after an argument, apparently for no reason, that I personally struggle to sleep after an argument with no real conclusion, and that my mind just keeps on thinking about it the next day. Okay, then this is really severe. This is highly toxic of a situation. This needed to end after the first time it happened. This is very unacceptable behavior. Because she's taking out her frustrations, whatever they may be. I don't know if she's on her period, which you're not mentioning that. I bet you would have mentioned that because the emotional fluctuations, mental and emotional fluctuations, that is very common and expected. But there's no mention of that. So if it's not that, menstruation, then what else is it? Does she work? Because if she works, is the frustration coming from there? Is she not telling you? Obviously, she's not telling you. But I highly doubt that you're the one at fault here. Unless you are and you're not mentioning anything, but pretty much this whole case seems like you're innocent, the way you're presenting it. So let's just take it at face value and assume the benefit of the doubt. Well, then we don't know what's really causing all this frustration. It's not the video games. You see, because I believe she's turning to the video games to vent off her frustration because she's got to win a few of those games, or at least have fun. It's not like we're in a casino with addictive behavior here, but she could have been addictive, but I don't see any signs of addiction to the video games. That's her outlet for stress. You like to read a book, and she likes to browse on her phone and also read a book. So you guys know how to vent off your frustration or boredom or whatnot. But you guys should be the star of the show. Your domestic life is key. Get it right. If it starts to become boring, spice it up. If it starts to become like this, where you're in your man cave and she's in her, I guess, a woman cave in this example, well, that's okay for a little bit. You guys have your personal space, but you guys have to come together, especially at night, at least to say good night and I love you. So that's just really bad. And you're thinking about it the next day. You're obviously very hurt. And this is happening every year. You're saying a few times, max. Okay, let's see how this concludes.
It gets so bad that I have to sleep on the guest bed just to not be frustrated about how soundly she's sleeping next to me. I can't help but feel like her waiting to bring up these annoyances and frustrations until right before bed is a bit of a power play, by avoiding having to actually discuss the issues and also punishing me by ruining my sleep. I just really don't know what to do or say about this. This is something that happens maybe 2 or 3 times a year. Every time it happens, the next day we say that we'll try to communicate better, that she won't wait until she's already super frustrated to let me know I've done something that annoys her, etc. But it still keeps happening. Does anyone here have any advice about how I ought to handle the discussion we're likely to have about this later today?
Unbelievable. Let's go ahead and have a look at his final statements here. It gets so bad that I have to sleep on the guest bed just to not be frustrated about how soundly she's sleeping next to me. Yeah, it's not fair, is it? It's not fair when the abusive partner, she couldn't care less. She's having her sound sleep and you're not. And it could work the other way around in other cases where the guy is sleeping soundly and the woman is staying up at night. Because there's no closure, like he says. No final understanding of each other, what's really going on. So I don't know how much he's trying to pry and try to figure out what's going on with her. I can't help but feel like her waiting to bring up these annoyances and frustrations until right before bed is a bit of a power play. It is a power play. By avoiding having to actually discuss the issues and also punishing me by ruining my sleep. Yes, but you can't be a pushover. You can't. Stand your ground. Ask her. Don't let her go to sleep. Don't be abusive about it. But you have to be a little bit more demanding, right? In a non-aggressive fashion, in a non-aggressive way. You have to get to the core. If not now because it's too late, then tomorrow. You guys should schedule a time to really talk about just this. And if she's unable to do that, then it's time to consider a divorce because that's extremely toxic. She should have said at the very least, it's almost a cliche, honey, we'll talk about it tomorrow. We'll discuss it another time. And then you as a partner should expect that time to come very soon because it should be important to her to get to the bottom of it, to express her feelings. You're dealing with a toxic partner. Luckily, there's no kids involved from what I see here. It's not too late to back out because if she became this way and she's not willing to fix herself in order to fix your marriage, do not hit that continue button. Do not kick the can down the road. You have to start considering divorcing this person. It's not about the video games. She's literally disrespecting you and she doesn't care. And that is extremely toxic. I can forgive somebody maybe one day. You're saying it happens a few times a year. That's already way too much. And you guys already discussed it. How to communicate better, more effectively, more efficiently. And she doesn't care. She doesn't learn anything then. It sounds like by what you're telling me here that you're the one in control of your own emotions, which is great. And that you're willing to communicate about it in a loving, civilized fashion, but she's all asleep. She doesn't care. I just really don't know what to do or say about this. This is something that happens maybe 2 or 3 times a year. There it is. But it doesn't matter if it's once a year. It's enough out of the 365 days to be enough to consider divorcing. That's so disrespectful. To just treat you like trash. And say, you know what? I don't even care about saying anything to you. You know how toxic that is? And it's only going to get worse. I can understand maybe once or twice, but you're saying per year. You guys been with each other 5 years. So that's what? 15 times max? Or 10 times? That's already way too many times over of the same lesson. If it's chronic, you should probably already know by now. If you guys already talked, see, this is what amazes me. I haven't even finished reading this yet. This is what simply amazes me. The husband doesn't know why this keeps happening. Because I imagine, let's say the first time it happened, let's play detective. The first time it happened, she should have told you why she was behaving that way. It sounds to me that you never found out of all this over a dozen times, or close to a dozen times, you still don't know. That amazes me. How could you possibly know? Then, you know what? Go ahead and grab that divorce. Because if she's never going to tell you, because it sounds like she never told you, and if she did tell you what's been going on in that head of hers, or maybe emotional or PTSD or something, then you already have your answer. It's the same deal. Now she has to go see a psychologist, not you. You're not going to be able to help her. But why should you carry that burden after so many times? You're not her punching bag. You should be happy in this relationship. 5 years together, living with each other. It sounds to me like you're the one who's serious, and she's the one trying to be evasive. She's neglecting you. So you know what? This is more than just video games. There's something really wrong with her. And if it's not salvageable, if the situation isn't fixable, then that's just the end of it. Because then if you introduce kids into the mix, you start investing in a home, maybe you guys already have, it just gets worse. Because you're running that high risk, that big red flag. You already know. One is already too many times. I could understand maybe an accident and she learned and moved on. Maybe a couple of times, maybe 3 times. But not about the same type of issue, which it doesn't look like you know why she's behaving this way. Okay, so every time it happens, the next day we say that we'll try to communicate better. You guys are obviously... What happened after the first time? Did you say the same thing? Hey, the next day we should communicate better. Did you ever find out why she gets like this? That she won't wait until she's already super frustrated to let me know I've done something that annoys her. Okay, the soap. That's not that annoying. Not annoying enough to say, you know what, I'm not going to tell him I love him. She doesn't feel anything for you at this point. And I don't know why. Maybe you don't even know why. But maybe it's best that way to not even know. Because if she really loves you, she wouldn't be behaving like this. Not at all. And that is already a highly toxic marriage. And it's already pretty much failing. Or probably already failed at this point, after the first few arguments about the same thing, which is highly unacceptable. You're supposed to learn and move on. Once again, it's not being a perfectionist. It's just, you should expect more from your partner and from yourself. Obviously, you're fulfilling that role from what it sounds like. You're doing your part. She's not. And it's only going to get worse. That she won't wait until she's already super frustrated. Okay, but it still keeps happening. See, that's the problem. Why does it still happen? That's what simply amazes me. You saying it, like the same situation already, and you guys been together for 5 years. Why is this still happening? This is no reason to be that frustrated. Oh, because she plays a lot of video games and, she gets stressed. No. It's something else, and if she's never going to tell you, then how do you call that better communication after the first time it happened? You guys have horrible communication. Maybe you're trying, but she's not, as you're stating. Unless you're leaving something out, but I'm going to take it at face value. Does anyone here have any advice about how I ought to handle this discussion? Yes, I have some advice. Grab the divorce papers. You have to tell her, this is your ultimatum. Either you tell me what's bothering you, why you get so frustrated and abusive towards me, because you have to recognize that she is literally abusing you with that behavior over and over again. So you're becoming a pushover if you're going to continue with that relationship. A victim of abuse, a willful victim, if that. At that. So that's my advice to you is grab the divorce papers. It's time to call it quits. I mean, let me tell you something. I understand how distracting and fun video games, movies, music, the internet, and any other activity can be. But if you're involved in a serious lifelong relationship, all distractions all distractions, whether they're productive or not, should always be secondary. Your partner always comes first. So the sooner you realize that, the better your relationship's going to be. She doesn't realize that. It sounds like you know that. But again, you should have handled this years ago when it first happened, because you said every time it happens, we say the next day we have better communication. That sounds like a lie to me. I'm not blaming the husband, but I'm saying, well, then you're a very poor communicator, because maybe you're good at it now, but how come this problem wasn't resolved? Why does it keep reoccurring? It wasn't solved the first time or the second time or the third time. Like I said, we already did the mathematics. How many potential times? You said 2 or 3 times a year. Even if it was just 1 year, 2 or 3 times, I could understand 2, maybe 3, but you said per year. So, why hasn't it been squashed? And I'm not going to repeat myself with that question, but that is the big mystery out of this case. How could a situation like this with the same problem keep going over and over and over again? It's highly toxic, it's highly unacceptable, and if she's really that way as you describe, then young man, you need to grab those divorce papers and find somebody far better than that. Somebody who's not going to abuse you. And somebody who will say I love you back and good night back. And with that said, this has been Coach Ben's Case by Case. Much love, everybody.